When did we need life to be so predictable and safe that it siphoned all the adventure and aliveness out? The antidote is questions and initiations to open the mystery back up by challenging everything we think we know. And our guest today, Lincoln Stoller, is here to invite us to some interesting perspectives. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Okay, everybody. Welcome back to Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is us, greater than anything we could even imagine, essence, beingness, beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably to a new understanding, a new pathway, a new doorway to open, a new revelation. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and I love having these conversations week after week and instigating you to think about things in a different way than you did before. Because why? Because anytime we get too certain about anything, we're probably off track. And this kind of idea has been coming to me recently, even more strongly than it has before, probably because I'm a founder of a community. I lead this inner medicine community, and I brought all these pieces in for contemplation, and we're going to look at all these things. And then in the moment I get certain about it, I know I'm probably off track, because then we go back to beginner's mind. And if you're in beginner's mind, you get to experience awe and wonder. You get a new revelation. You get a new insight. It didn't come from you. It came from somewhere beyond, permeated inside your being. And then you distilled it into a whole new view that even you didn't have before. Wow. And then isn't that the juice of life? Isn't that why we run experiments? Isn't that why we contemplate? Isn't that why we go to nature? Isn't that why we go to shamans? Isn't that why we turn to medicine? We turn to everything so we can unpack it and learn something new that we didn't know before. Because if we're just stuck with all the same stuff that we know, it's not that exciting after a while. And I think we're on the cusp of knowing a whole lot more stuff that's really even more interesting about what we're capable as humans. And we've got to really put our arms around the total human, because we're also an animal inside a body, inside a lineage, inside an ancestry, inside a history, inside a society, inside a government. There's so much to contend with. So where do we even start? I don't know. Let's just pull some threads and see where it goes. Today, I'm with Lincoln Stoller, who is somebody you can pull threads with. And I think we're going to pull a lot of threads today, and it's going to be interesting. And I don't know where it's going to go, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. So what about Lincoln? Who is he? He's a mountaineer, a physicist, a computer scientist, an entrepreneur, a psychotherapist, a hypnotist, neuropsychologist. Why? Because there's questions. And you got to pursue all the places to go find the answers. And Lincoln does counseling and consulting and brain training to achieve goals, relieve stress, redefine your future. And he does all of this from Vancouver Island, which is, I've heard, simply beautiful part of Canada. And so, Lincoln, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Carrie. Oh boy. Here we go.
Let's go on the adventure. We don't know where we're going to go, but
let's go. Yeah.
How did you get off on this tangent of exploring so many seemingly different, but yet completely interrelated disciplines? I mean, science and therapy, psychology, hypnosis,
and shamanism. Shamanism. Big, of course.
Yeah. Mountaineering, physics, computer science. One would think that these things are not connected, yet in my own path, computer science, yeah. Nature stuff, yeah. Shamanism, yeah. Psychotherapy, yeah. Hypnosis. How do we get off on that? How did you get started with all of these inquiries?
Well, there's two questions. How did I get started and where did I take it? I think I got started as a kid in a family that left me with certain needs that weren't satisfied. And I was anxious, motivated, and somewhat aggressive to move forward. All those kind of energies that a kid has. And I think the best thing I did as a kid was I rejected school. And so I was busy rejecting, and that broke me out of the box. I didn't really have another box to get into because I was, didn't have a car and I didn't have a world view and I didn't have anybody outside the family. But I was dissatisfied. And dissatisfaction is a great thing if you can put it to use. So I basically resolved to do lots of things, which is the fuel that I then used to do lots of things. But at the time, I needed to light the fuse or light the fire, the kindling. And I would go to lots of teachers and they would give me baloney answers, just the usual stuff, people working 9 to 5 with some kid who wants to know too much. And a couple of things happened. I would pursue people. I would get tutors to tutor me in subjects I wanted to know more about. My parents had enough money I should have gone to a good private school, but I didn't know. I even looked at private schools, but I didn't know what to look for, and they all looked the same anyhow. So I ended up just going to public school and just being a kind of a rebel and an annoyance. And I would be assigned certain books to read, and I would refuse to read them. And I would substitute other books, like big books, like Dostoevsky or something, and people would laugh at me. And of course, I didn't really understand the books, but I read them anyway. So all that was kind of gestating. And then I was happy, luckily, in several regards, to start rock climbing and mountaineering when I was young, which is really just, an extension of jungle gyms, going higher and further, but it go a lot higher and get yourself into a lot more trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But it also took me to new places and made me responsible, both to my climbing partners and to ask for responsibility from them and to engage in, real fraternal relationships of camping together, cooking together, planning together, executing things together, trying, failing, being safe. I didn't hurt myself, but there were plenty of opportunities to do that. You have to have a healthy fear to not go too far. But, got into various troubles of cars skidding off the road and various the usual things of a traveler in strange places. And I think that was very important in my later life. So that was my teenage years.
Did you wreck a lot of cars as a teenager? I'm just curious.
No, I hit the brakes in time.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I didn't go over the rail. And I don't quite, you could say it was my guardian angel, but I don't think it was that crazy. I had a few ridiculous situations, falling and being buried in avalanches and stuff, but most of the time I'd had decent judgment. And, not everybody likes decent judgment. And one time we spent thousands of dollars and months of planning to go on an expedition to Alaska. And when I met the people I was going to be climbing with, I refused to go any further and blew the whole thing up. I said, I'm out of here.
So did you find yourself kind of destroying opportunities a lot, like initiating something and then just kind of having that inner sense and then just destroying it?
Not a lot, but in that case, yes. And, I didn't destroy anything but my chance to get killed. And that wasn't a bad thing to destroy. So I was, in the doghouse for the rest of my life or their life for these people. But I think I saved all our lives. But that was just, one thing. And learning about stuff can be, especially if it's risky stuff, it can be dangerous. Here's an example that's interesting. In learning how to fly gliders, there's no real school. You have to be part of the community. The community teaches you. You can read books, but it's a hands-on thing. And so I was in several glider accidents because I was never part of the community. Because the community is just retired airline pilots, and I'm not one of them. So it was odd. It can be hard to learn things I say the same about physics. You can learn it in books, but you don't learn how to be creative. And they don't teach that in school. And again, it's a community. And most people are not creative. They work within the confines of the community. You could say that about lots of artists and lots of people and lots of professionals. So if you want to go outside, it can get sketchy. You may not learn fast. You may not learn right. You may not be safe. You're going to have a certain extra weight of defining yourself, defending yourself, presenting yourself. Like what if you were a voice artist who had a really squeaky voice and that was the way you were creative? It would be tough to get recognized, and you would have to recognize that was just your authentic self. Nobody liked it. And so it is with a lot of creative things. They don't look great at first. You have to refine them. And, same with like spiritual powers. There's this book I loved called Shouting at the Wolf, who said, if the doorbell rings and you answer the door and there's a person outside and they don't have any head on, then you don't have to invite them in. You have to learn your judgment when you go into a new space. And so that's kind of true with using psychedelics, which is something I've done a lot of. You have to know how to navigate the territory. It's like you're in a new vehicle and you don't know how to drive. You can easily crash in some psychological sense.
Would you say it's fair that like you spent a lot of time in your life getting free of boxes and conventional thinking and, let's say, groupthink and finding a new pathway or exploring? It feels like there's a explorer inside of you is what it feels like.
That was sort of encouraged through things. You have to like pull together all your memories and experiences to sort of put them in an order, sort of a puzzle. Your history is a puzzle. So my father was an architectural photographer, so he was interpreting what other people did. And that involved seeing things, doing things, talking to people, being social, traveling, having some technical skill. And my mother was a visual artist who wasn't much of a mother. She was more of an artist, and she was over the whole mother thing. I was born when she was 42 or something. So I was encouraged to be creative, but I wasn't given a lot of direction. I was given support and given motivation, but I sort of feel like a rocket, an overpowered rocket. So I did avoid hurting myself. I didn't do drugs carelessly. When I got involved with drugs, it was ceremonially, and they are not exactly drugs because they're
plant medicines. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting too, because they weren't really medicines from the shamanic point of view. They were sacraments, not medicines. It's a big difference. You don't go to a pharmacy for a sacrament. So there's a different attitude you come to it with. Like I remember I was interested in the medicine, sacrament, drugs, whatever they were, and I would grow them, which I'm not very good at. And then you have to like extract the components, which is quite a skill. It's like chemistry. And then you have to know what you've gotten, which is usually kind of a mud at the end of it. And then you ingest it, which is, borderline foolish. But I remember doing that and having this very unpleasant reaction and basically hearing this voice that said, "What the hell are you doing here? This is not a chemical for you." And, I had to sort of walk it off and laugh it off and learn from it. You do your homework as best you can, but sometimes you drop a factor of 10 or something, some sort of mistake.
Whoops.
Yeah. In this case,
some whoops moments.
Yeah, there were plenty of those. And that was it. And it kind of like I grew out of that. It's like enough of that. My whole system and my age and all that. Like I say, I'm more interested in hypnotherapy and dream work.
So it seems like you kept like pushing boundaries and opening things up and getting curious and getting adventurous, like you said, but that was like that rocket energy. I'm really interested in that idea, mostly because when my oldest son was 2.5-ish, I was out to dinner with his father, and this total stranger walked up to us and pointed to my son and said, "This one's a rocket. He's going to need a lot of fuel to get off the ground." I didn't know what he was talking about. And then years later, I'm like, oh, it's like, yeah, like when I think people can identify it. And I do think this person was like an angel. I think they came to just give me a little heads up because I was completely clueless. I had no clue what I had just signed up for, having a child. They just let me take the child home from the hospital and I had no idea what to do. It's like, what do you do with the child? I don't know. And you just do your best. But yeah, when you have a child that's got a lot of rocket fuel inside of them, that takes mastery. That takes mastery to guide a person like that. For somebody that's pushing the boundaries and everything and like wants to know and is curious and has an active mind and is a certain level of brilliance inside, you've got to like give it guardrails of some kind, right? But it doesn't sound like you had a lot of guardrails, but you ended up finding things anyway. I mean, you're still here. You're lucid. That's good. You still have a brain. That's good. You're wise from it. That's good. How did you do that? Like, how did you not fall off the rails? That's what I want to know. How did you not go venture too far into the woods and then not be able to find your way back?
Well, to go back to what I said, I kept looking for people and kept criticizing and discarding the people who didn't meet my needs. I didn't get too angry at them. I didn't Oh, yeah, I did go out and like vandalize things. And I had my vandal phase and my
Okay.
shoplifting phase. But mountaineering kind of got me out of that because you don't need,
Nature.
yeah, there's something much more, I don't know, it was more, real danger was more appealing to me than fabricated danger.
Ah, that resonates. Okay. Yes.
Like
Mhm.
taking plant medicines that I grew or going on adventures that I planned. I remember in my vandal phase, or the end of my vandal phase, I was sitting above a throughway entrance throwing snowballs at the cars that were driving below and trying to hit them on the windshield. And a direct hit would be great because it would make a lot of sound and the car would go screeching to a halt. And I had a particularly good strike and was sitting there looking down on the car and gloating at how successful I was when somebody walked up the hill behind me and grabbed me. And it was the guy who was in the car
Oh
who I
my
didn't see.
God.
And it turned out to be my science teacher.
Wow.
There was something cosmic about that. I mean, I was like his favorite student. And of course, I just blamed it on some friend, to which I felt a certain amount of shame to this day. But, you do what you do. And I mean, he was a shitty science teacher, but all right, he was the best I had. And I kept looking for people. And, this was a certain invitation. This whole snowball thing was a kind of an invitation. And he responded to the invitation. I mean, what were the chances of me hitting my science teacher?
It's
It,
just completely aligned. It's like divine. There's no other way to explain that. I mean, that's,
yeah, and and at some point you kind of make a decision, and I think after that I stopped throwing snowballs. Right? I mean, why go any further? You achieved the goal, which was to get a reaction from the world. Really, that was the whole point of it to begin.
ah,
And then when I started mountaineering, you don't have to go so far. The world is right there. In a sense, it's like a lottery where you make a bet and you hope it's an educated bet. It's not just a random bet. And you watch other people in your environment making their bets. And mountaineering's a dangerous thing. If you keep at it long enough, you eventually die. Not everybody, but I would say, half people. If you keep at it, you eventually die from an accident. And you're lucky if you
because you
survive the
can't
whole way.
possibly calculate all the odds,
At
especially
some
when
point,
nature
yeah.
is very unpredictable. So,
Yeah, and if you're going to be in more and more dangerous situations, the consequences of your mistakes get increasingly serious. I mean, that's good in terms of learning to be reasonable and wise and careful. But how much of that, do you need? It's not like Russian roulette, which is random. You do have the chance to use those skills if you develop them. And so one of my mentors taught me basic skills, which kind of addressed one of the questions you just asked. One of his basic skills that he taught me was, as you're moving through the environment, always turn around and look behind you. Because if you have to turn around in an unplanned way and retrace steps that you've come across that weren't in your plan, you won't know what they look like because you'll have always looked forward and never looked back. And now you'll be in an emergency and you won't know where you're going. So he would always be turning around and looking behind him. And that isn't what you would think that what an adventurer would do, be constantly scanning rearward. But it's an incredibly valuable piece of information to have for plan B, which is retreat. And he was famous for retreating at the drop of a hat because he didn't have any problem coming back later. Most people get attached to what they've done. I mean, this is very spiritual. You get attached to your life, you get attached to your
yeah.
image, your investment, your people around you, your reputation. But he didn't have much attachment to anything except the fact that he wanted to go forward in a safe way. And if anything was unsafe, he'd turn around and go back. And people would call him a coward, and people would call him bailing out and failing to commit. And he would say, oh, hell with you. I'll just come back next weekend. And as a result, he, accomplished more than anyone else in North America because he did it all his whole life and he never stopped, which was another thing of commitment and endurance and stubbornness, and not stupidity and not foolishness. But some of these people teach you basic things that you may not even appreciate at the time. So the first book I wrote was called The Learning Project, and Rites of Passage is its subtitle.
Yes.
And I talked to a lot of people who went through Rites of Passage. And they said several important things, one of which was find mentors, find role
Mhm.
models who really exhibit the skills you're trying to achieve. And a mentor doesn't sit you down and teach you. They don't test you. They don't tell you to read books. They will accompany you. You're generally part of their life. And so they give you the whole texture of the experience. It's not a test or a trial or a small version of reality. It's the full version of reality. You're fully responsible and they're fully with you. And it was a great book. I talked to a lot of inspiring people, mostly students of mentors and a couple of elders as well, and some teenagers who really were just starting and hadn't yet found mentors. So I think that that's three levels: being a young person, being an adept or a student, and being an elder, if you get that far, or at least feeling some certitude about what you know, are three parts of the equation. And this is all like mythic. You can go back to the Greek myths and you'll find all these stages and all these, the deities and the heroes and the naive people. They're Odysseus and the Hades and all
Well,
these.
it's like the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. It's like that.
Well, here we are, and talking about we're not talking about it, or we sort of are, talking about shamanism and spirituality.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably the best container to put all of the stuff that I do into. But, scientists wouldn't go with that, and therapists wouldn't go with that, and psychotherapy clients won't go with that. So I don't talk about it, except maybe with you. But there's always more to be seen and understood. At the same time, we're always trying to accumulate knowledge and understanding. So what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fascinating. You said a lot of things that I've been really contemplating on recently. My partner and I have been creating an online course for our inner medicine training, and we've been working with level 2, rebirth, we call it that, but it's based loosely in the Venus sequence of the gene keys. And the thing that interests me so much is that we got to the part where we were talking about the IQ, which is the mental body development between 14 to 21, and about the importance of community and elders sort of providing a safe, buffered space for exploration of ideas, so that when you have somebody who's like really pushing the envelope, they're a teenager, 14 to 21, they really want to know the answers. They don't want to just like learn by numbers. They want to know, they want to explore, they want to question. They don't believe you. They're a cynic, or they're saying, no, I don't believe that. That's not true. But that's actually somebody who's wanting to know, right? And then you want to provide a safe space for them to have inquiry and ask those questions and even prompt some new ones they didn't think about, and help them test that mental prowess, right? So that they don't end up with a defended ego. Because if they end up with a defended ego, then they probably become the person you're talking about who's like all intellectual, but has no integration with their heart and their emotions and their humanness. Because if we don't tear down the defensive structures around the mind, then we're just simply covering up emotional wounding from the EQ, which is the 7 to 14. We're just covering up emotional wounding that's already there. So what we want to do is like take this opportunity when it's a natural impulse. Teenagers are meant to push the boundaries of society. They are designed to push the boundaries of what we think we know as a society. They're designed to challenge our groupthink and to say, is that really true? Or is that not true? That's what they're there for. But instead of getting met with that, in many communities, they're being told, don't ask questions. Shut up, sit down, do your numbers, fill out your little bubble on your test. They're being told, go to AI and ask. They're not being guided how to use this tremendous capacity of the minds in order to explore life and run their own experiments, to be their own scientist, which I think is what you couldn't help but be. That's who you are. Like, you came in and you luckily had parents that were like, he's going to be creative and explore, and he's probably going to break some stuff. And, oh, well, we're just going to help him do that. Give him the resources he's asking for so he can really learn. And some people think that's a problem. It gets diagnosed in our world as like problematic, or you're ADHD, or you're this, or you're that, because you won't just sit down your ass in the seat and do what you're told. But like, these are the future leaders. So why would you ever tell a child like that to not go explore stuff, to not try stuff out? I got to say, as a mother of one of these, though, it's hard being a mom to one of them, especially when you really care about them and you're like, oh my God, what are they doing now? I'm like, ah, like the panic in my body for a good 27 years.
My parents didn't pay any attention to me.
Maybe that's the mistake. I paid attention. I was like, oh, to do it now. My God.
If they had known what I was doing, they'd freak out. They would have freaked out.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean,
it's scary.
Yeah, well,
and it's necessary, right? It's necessary.
I don't know. I mean, that's easy to say if it goes right, but if it goes wrong, hard to say.
I guess the narrative depends on the outcome, right? In many cases.
You want people to explore sexuality safely. You want them to explore risky behavior safely and whatever, society and groups safely. And I think safety is built on a certain sense of self-preservation, self-worth. What I didn't have and could have used a little more of was a sense of self-value, that there's more to be gained from not doing this than there is from doing it, because I have a rich future and many things that will happen if I give it time. But in a sense, I was anxious and insecure and grasping for novelty and experience. And, there were a few experiences that could have gone tragically sideways. And, I would like to say that I had a guardian angel, but the important thing about guardian angels is that they have to give you the responsibility. Otherwise, you think you're always being protected by somebody and you're immune from your own mistakes, which is not a way to work. No. So,
but that's a rites of passage, right? I think this is why Indigenous communities have always had these rites of passage where they send at a certain age, when it's the right age for that kid, send them out into nature, no food, no water, go find your vision, right? Like you have to face nature and you might not survive it.
Yeah, but most of them are not too terrible. You can go a few days without food, They don't send you off in a glacier. They just send you off into the woods for the most part. And it's like, what my mentor taught me about turning around and looking back? That's how you don't get lost in the woods, because the woods all look the same unless you've memorized where you've been. And then you're much better off. You can navigate through the woods if you understand where you're going and you've seen it before. Anyway, yeah, I've done a bunch of these sort of walkabout things, these explorations into the wilderness. And enough. That's okay. I don't do it anymore. Vancouver Island's a great place, but I don't get out much.
But you're exploring different territory now, like the inner territory, the mind, the spirit, the soul. Art. It's like art. Yeah, it's a different kind of initiation, right? It's a different kind of passage.
And I have a 15-year-old son who's learning. And I have two kids. Neither of them were as stupid as I. I don't say stupid. Neither of them were as risk inviting as I was. They're both more cautious. And that makes me feel safer. Me. Because I think
my feeling of safety is important to me, but also their journey is their journey, right?
And so I got a 28-year-old and he's a psychotherapist now. So good for him. And I had two wives, kid with each. And those were both tragic mistakes from my point of view, but I guess they're not finished. I refuse to call them finished until I feel they've come together. And I'm not sure how I can make them come together. They're kind of like learning experiences where you're never quite sure where the end is, but you keep trying to extract more value from the experience. And the second marriage was, I didn't even hardly know this person. And they said, we'd like to come and study with you. They said. And I said, I'm not interested in having a student. I'm interested in having a family. You want to come and have a family? And they said, okay. And I think about that in relation to Asian families that have arranged marriages, how much better it would have been if this had been an arranged marriage and some wise people had decided whether we were an appropriate pair. But no, we just said, want to have a family? Sure. Being pregnant. So is that a good way to go about life or not? I mean, if you're ready for what you get.
We tried to make life safe, Lincoln, and we have a bunch of kids sitting in schools like basically zombies, having to sit in a chair.
I never tried to make it safe. And I don't encourage people to be safe either. But here's the important things. There's levels of risk, right? There's living risk, and then there's mortal risk, and then there's risk to society, and you have to judge them all.
I mean, there's risk to your feelings. I mean, Those would be really
future, the risk to your limbs. I mean, I think about that. It's important to be risk aware. I think about it every time you get into a car, hurtling down the road at 60 miles an hour with a seatbelt on. That's going to protect you? No, it's your judgment that protects you. And that's true in many situations. So I just, work on what I work on. And there's the other thing about what do you invest in? I'm very asocial, not antisocial, asocial. I don't see a lot of opportunity in socializing, so I don't. I'm much more interested in getting clients who will tell me about their inner lives, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
And to which I participate and get paid somewhat.
It's fascinating. And it's also you're helping someone to come more in love with themselves, which is like such a gift. I love that.
And to take it another step, I'm playing a role in their life, but people often say to me, are you attracted to being a healer? And I say, no, I'm not a healer. I'm just a journeyer. I'm a participant. What people's healing is not evident to me. It's not what they say it is, because if they did know, they wouldn't need me. So there's always a certain amount of confusion. And I like to work with people who are confused and going beyond their comfort zone. But that means that I don't really know where they're headed or what's right for them either. So for some people, their healing journey is me telling them they're full of shit, right?
That can definitely be healing for someone that needs that message.
Well, you're not going to hear it from your friends.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be your friends. So you're going to hear it from somebody who has a different point of view. And then, it depends who you are. If you're an adventurous person, that can be a challenge. And you can respond to that and saying, well, then what's the truth? But if you're a defensive person, you'll say, that hurts me. I'm going away. I don't want to talk to you anymore. So I can't be sure that I'm saying the right thing. But if if the light bulb goes off and I feel called to say something, it's clear if there's an injury going on, somebody's injuring themselves or someone else, then you can feel, justified in speaking your piece. But if you're feeling there's a manipulation going on or a deception, I'll still say that this doesn't seem right. Or if I have a good sense of humor, I'll tell them they're full of shit.
But when do we get so fragile that we can't have our lives questioned or our beliefs questioned or our ideas or our narratives? Because that's fragile. If we can't have that questioned, like if we're not asking the questions, then we're just going along and we're believing it all. When maybe, this is what I found, is that there's some deeper truth that if we question it, we'll actually get to the next level of awareness or deepening, or things will open up more. And then it's even more amazing. So that only way to get that way is to be willing to question things and be questioned.
I have a conspiracy theory approach, which is that society needs people to conform in order to be consistent. And so there's this pressure to agree, even to the extent that, you have two political candidates, and they're both the same or not. I mean, Donald Trump was somebody who was not the same, and people are attracted to that. But look who you get when you invest in whatever's different.
It's been eye-opening. It's been really eye-opening about our culture, aspects of our culture that we don't prefer. It's wow. So
we did this,
I mean, it is part of our culture.
Well, I think Americans are getting what they deserve in a sense that, well, they voted these people in, so eat your cooking and learn from it. Learning is a lot more effective when you're really on the front lines, when you're really responsible, making the decisions and taking responsibility. And when you're not either taking responsibility or learning what's going on, you make bad decisions. You don't learn from them. And I think that's one of the problems with the changing world right now. People are far apart on one hand, but they're consumers of each other's goods on the other hand. They're affecting each other's lives, but they're not aware of it. If the current administration is removed from office because of the price of gas, that's pathetic. Then there's so much more to learn. The price of gas is just...
That's just the tiniest... ridiculous. Yeah, it's not even important. It's all the other stuff that's actually the stuff we need to work on, caring about our fellow humans, not expecting everybody to be exactly the same cookie cutter, getting resilient about having difficult conversations. I mean, there's a whole lot of lessons here, I think.
There are a whole lot of lessons.
We're going to do it together. It's not like anybody has the answer. It's just that we know the questions that need to be asked. That's the difference, I think.
I have an interesting story. I was a couch surfing host for a while when I had a house in New York. And a guy came to spend the weekend with me who told me this story that he and his friends wondered, as they lived in Manhattan, whether people would actually talk to each other because the place has a reputation for being cold and guarded. And so they said, well, yeah, let's see what happens if we put a sandwich board on ourselves and stand on the corner and say free conversations. So they did that. They went to Manhattan and put a sandwich board on themselves that said, talk to me. And they had a line that 2 blocks long of people waiting to talk to them.
Wow.
They spent all 2 days of the weekend talking to people endlessly. People really wanted to talk. They wanted to, it's not really any surprise. And in fact, if you've been to New York, you know the people will talk quite freely once they've determined that you're not an enemy. Everybody's got an opinion and they're very loud. So it's interesting that if you're open, and this is kind of a therapy, right? If you're open to hear what people have to say without telling them what they should think, you can engage a lot of dialogue. You can create a lot of dialogue. I'm not sure you make friends. Well, you sort of do.
Well, I think you explode. You explode. You expose and maybe explode the contents of their mind, which when revealed out there in presence with somebody actually paying attention and listening will disintegrate itself if it's not in truth. Like it'll just kind of expose itself as being a fabrication. Because when you're really with somebody who's totally present with you and you say and somebody says something that's like flimsy, it's evident in the energy. Like you can feel, because the person starts to backtrack and they go, well, wait a second. Because they can see it's not true.
Well, this is what's the difference between sane and insane people. Insane people have trouble doing that.
Okay.
Insane people get stuck on their delusions.
The psychosis. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition. They can't learn well.
Well, you know what's psychotic is that a lot of people think that they're sane when actually most of the world is psychotic. And then the people they call psychotic or psychosis usually are the people that are just aware of all the things that everybody else is not aware of. That's a whole nother topic.
Right. Be careful.
But I want to fling that out there.
Certain about anything. Right.
I mean, but I like your social experiment idea. I actually, and we're going to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, but I saw this on Facebook. This guy, this African-American guy who is not in support of the administration, did a social experiment. He put the red cap on with the whole slogan, and he started just bringing his body different places. And he noticed, he's like, all of these people that agreed with that were so kind and nice to me. And they were never kind and nice to me before. But the moment they thought I thought exactly the way they thought, all of a sudden I was their like bestie. But he said, I noticed in conversation that like I asked a question about something to this person about the policy or something, and they got immediately ostracized. Like, you're not one of us. So there's something about that. Questions indicate, if you're asking them, indicate you're not one of this like group, but you can blend in and be part of this group as long as you don't ask any of them. No questions. I don't know how that lands with you, but I thought it was so interesting. I was like, what a brave thing for this guy to do. Because he said, of course, everybody else who's against this administration were looking at me like they couldn't believe that I was like betraying my own people and right, like all of that. And I was like, yeah, I would have thought that about you. I would have sat back and judged you instantly. So like that tells me something about my judgment, right? And my like judge a book by its cover. Like,
I know a lot about science and history of science and scientists. And in my experience with scientists, I have this rule of 3 questions. You can ask why a certain thought, theory, or story is true once, and you'll get this pat answer. And if you question the pat answer a second time, you'll get a somewhat defensive, this is what we understand, and this is why the pat answer is true. And if you question it a third time, then they throw you out. Because then they realize you're not part of the community and you're not accepting the
narrative,
conceptual belief, which is, those are all the important questions, are the third questions. And that's why those third questions they're not accepted, they're not addressed. I'm talking about in science. But you could say it's true everywhere.
But that's the defended mind. That's the thing we were just talking about with like the lack of the initiation, the lack of the communal initiation that allows a young person to break down those mental barriers so that their integrated heart and mind and spirit, then they can ask all the questions in the world.
Well, in the end, and this is a good place to end.
Yeah.
The book that I wrote, this is the first book, I now have a dozen books, concluded. It didn't really conclude because I didn't try to conclude other people's opinions. But when I look back, the most conclusive opinion I found of the people I spoke to was, I wish I learned to love myself sooner.
Yes.
Which was actually stated to me by a Black woman scientist, gay, sort of revolutionary person who didn't fit anything she was in. She was counter to all of the stereotypes. So you could see that, yes, I guess for her, learning to love herself required establishing identity of her own in all of these regards. And it sort of entitled her to make the statement with the greatest clarity. And I felt it was pretty much the definition of how you become a truly adventurous, open-hearted, open-minded person, is you love yourself in the end. And I don't know where to find that. Maybe that's, at that point, you're just into the shamanic, angelic, God knows what realm.
Yeah, it's the journey. The whole journey is to discover that. So I think, so lovely. Gosh, what a beautiful tapestry we wove together today, Lincoln. I appreciate you being on the show. Is there anything that you want to share with people about how to get to know you better, how to work with you, or how to, move forward? I know I'm going to put a link to the book you mentioned that you wrote. I'll put that in the chat.
That was the first book, The Learning Project. The last book is Dreaming Yourself into Being, because I think dreams are the closest to the laboratory in which you fabricate your personality. And so the book, Dreaming Yourself into Being, you can get a free digital copy if you sign up on my blog.
Fantastic. So I'll put a link to your blog. I'll put a link to your website, your socials, and also your books. And lovely. All right. So thank you, everybody, for staying tuned with us. And please like, subscribe, and share this episode out with anybody that you think would really like what Lincoln has shared with us today and the conversation that we had. And I'm going to give you guys kisses. So I always give people kisses at the end. If you want to do it with me, you can, or you can just receive. Here they come, everybody. Love you guys so much. Have a fantastic week and contemplate all of these things that showed up in today's conversation. Enjoy. Let us know what you think. Bye for now. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are. Yeah, yeah.